Learn to be super successful. Subscribe to my channel, Meathead. Gabriel, would you agree that the Swiss are in slow motion?
Oh, man. Yeah, they're really slow.
Yeah.
So, Dan, what was your toughest deal to get done, and how did you get it done?
My toughest deal was my first deal, the $50 million contract, government contract, which Canada's already given up on. But because I didn't understand the process, and in those days, you couldn't find anybody that understood the process. And I did it, but I didn't do the set-aside business, because if I had known that, I'd probably still be in government contracts. And so I did a lot of shoe leather, because I couldn't afford to fly. Took a lot of buses to a lot of refineries. And of course, then serendipity, I walked in, the guy was retired one-star general that we had something to relate to. But I needed the money like more than some of you need money. Probably nobody in this room has ever taken a bus cross country to go fucking get a deal done, or a train. And the reason I could take a train or a bus, because at that time it was still close enough from the Vietnam War that vets, and I was still in active reserve, I could get dirt cheap tickets. Otherwise I couldn't, I wasn't, I probably would have walked across the country if I had to. So but that aside, Bow Valley, USA was a tough deal. But taking an option public was probably the hardest thing. When I was here, looking at the assets I bought overnight on the phone, I came to see that we could go public. And so I came back, and for the first time, I didn't know nobody had ever taken an option public. But I didn't give a shit. I had the Queen's lawyers and Freshfields, they never said no to anything. We can do anything. We represent the Queen, the Bank of England, the Church of England, and me. But they didn't allow me to go to the meeting. As professionally as they could, we would recommend that you don't come to the Bank of England with us. Fuck you! And then Jerry Knight, an ex-McKinsey guy, who I mentored, he says, he always called me Mr. Peña. Do you mind if I call you Dan now? This is really serious. There's a low probability that we can get it through with you in the meeting. And we respect you yelling and screaming, he's trying to be nice, but you yell at these guys at the Bank of England, this isn't going to happen. So that kind of resonated with me. And so I sat in the Freshfields offices drinking whiskey from about 9:30 in the morning until about 40:35 to be exact. And I got the call, we got it done. But nobody had ever done that. We took zero and made it into a couple $100 million with a stroke when they hit the hammer and it went public. And then I ran to Amsterdam immediately and did it again. And the Dutch didn't ask too many questions. The Dutch never ask too many questions, as long as the fees are enough. And so we did it again. And so we were public on the Bourse. And I got the whole story about the tulips, bullshit. It's not bullshit. And so that was the toughest. I turned zero. And then I turned it into another couple $100 million in the Netherlands. Actually, I short $500 million. And I got zero credit. In hindsight, 5-10 years later, it pissed me off that I didn't get written up, in Forbes or someplace. I turned zero into about $500 million. But anyway, I had the money, so I soothed my ego. But it was one of the great deals of the 80s. It was listed as the 65th or 68th best deal done in the 80s. Actually, it was the best deal because all those others had equity. Somebody wrote a fucking check. Our deal, nobody wrote a check. And a lot of people got instantly wealthy. So that was, but I had a tremendous team. I had real rocket scientists around me. They were willing to put their reputation on the line But it all started with the lawyers you can't afford. Even though I would never tell Freshfield this, and hypothetically, Freshfields, if you're watching this, without them, I would have never represented the Queen. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's powerful. And that's why even today, you heard, for those of you that saw the webinar with the Goomba brothers, it's spot on. The lawyers you can't afford made this happen. And I made those Cuban guys 2 or 3 times richer in the last 2 or 3 years. And so they're high and lofty, not the Goomba brothers, but the professionals. They can get stuff done that's unbelievable. And that almost always equates to money in your pocket. And it certainly did for me. Even when I got thrown out, 8 years later, 7 years later, I walked away as the largest independent shareholder. I wasn't the largest institutional shareholder with a lot of money. Again, money's not everything. But most of you are here for money. And some of you are here for the fame and notoriety that money is linked to or associated with. And the whole world changed for me. I mean, it just did. So to answer your question, it was the option. Now, I've done 50 things not dissimilar to the option, but none of where it had never been done before. I've been savvy enough to get on the bus that created a lot of money, but somebody else had thought of it. So I was second, third derivative. But that's the one of the things that I was the first one to think of it. And of course, everybody said you can't do it. The one ex-McKinsey guy, Jeremy Knight, guy was his soul, is a super kid, one of my mentees in the city. He said, we can get this done if we're willing to go balls to the wall. And a lot of the guys like Goldman Sachs won't go balls to the wall because if it doesn't go right, they don't want the embarrassment. If you push them hard enough, they will do it. And if you pay enough fees. And I've never been one to restrain the fee system. I.e., you saw the Nabisco example today. That deal should have never happened if it wasn't for the fees. But if you're on the other end, the recipient of all the money, you don't give a fuck how many fees were paid. And there was nothing dishonest done in that deal. It might have been immoral because of how much fucking money was paid. I'm jealous because I wasn't part of the deal. And that's why they wrote the article in the FT with me, a blind man, and the pencils. I had a reputation of that. Again, I didn't think it was anything wrong with it, but some of my shareholders thought it was insulting. So then I had to go to fucking court, satisfy my shareholders, and we won. But whenever I'd walk down in the city near the Bank of England, and people would walk down the street like this when they passed me, It was fun. As Gabriel will tell you, it's fun making money, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
The other question. Yes, sir.
As we grow our companies and raise funds and we get liquidated and we go below 50%, we become...
You mean reduced in equity? Correct.
Okay. So let's say we're in that circumstance right now.
Correct.
Now, 11-figure company where we're using equity below 50% and we're now vulnerable to other board members taking us out. Right? Besides, the question that I have for you, sir, is what strategies would you recommend to position yourself to have a good defense?
Well, the best defense is a good offense, but I had premier shareholders at the Bank of England, the Church of England, Prudential, the Fidelity. I had the creme de la creme, and they stayed with me because I performed. So your best defense is to have the creme de la creme as shareholders that will support you. And I had the Kuwaitis, I had some other sovereign funds. Now it's not impossible, but it's almost impossible unless you can get one of those major shareholders to flip. You're in there for life, because you're given the benefit of the doubt. If you have those kind of shareholders, it's because they have done the due diligence the minor shareholders have not done. That's not always true, but it is true most of the time. So you want to surround yourself. Again, it's who you're rubbing elbows with. You want to surround yourself with the big fucking hitters. And then when I got the Japanese government, and I got the Israeli government, and I got several other governments, in addition to sovereign funds, I inherently knew the more powerful, even if they only had a 2 or 3% interest in my company, the more powerful my supporters, the less likely people would want to tangle with them. And so that's my answer. We need to have powerful supporters. But then you got to perform. You can't willy-nilly just suck money out and not perform. And the kids in current days, in the last 10 or 15 years, forget the performance part. They may be great salespersons and be able to convince them ABC. But then, they'll give you a quarter or half a year or even a year if something happens, there's a hiccup or a speed bump. But you got to perform. Otherwise, they'll tear your lungs out and throw you in the street. And the only reason I wouldn't still be CEO of the company, but the only reason I got thrown out was Iraq fucking invaded Kuwait, and the share price dropped 75%. And the CEO, and in addition to that, I was the largest shareholder, somebody's got to fall on the sword. And it was me. A lot of money, but I fell on the sword. Otherwise, the shareholder and the city, as it's called, the financial district, were fucking happy as Larry. They had gotten past shooting the messenger vis-a-vis the message. Because I had been there 9.5 years saying outrageous shit, ostensibly choking people and doing the shit that I was accused of. But I performed like crazy. There was only one reporting period in 10 years I didn't make money. Only one reporting period. But when Saddam Hussein, fuckhead, invaded Kuwait, and then, bless you, and then they thought Kuwait, this is before the U.S. and the Allies entered the war, during the Gulf period in the early 90s, they said Kuwait will lose the war by itself. The Kuwaitis would lose the war to the Iraqis. That was true. But when the West entered the war, they said that Kuwait didn't have enough money to rebuild. I knew, because I saw the numbers, they got plenty of money to rebuild. But they were selling off assets, and they owned 30% of me. So although they never sold a share in me, and I'm running around the city and New York and fucking Tokyo saying they're not selling me, the stock price plummeted. And not at the very, very bottom, but at, when it was down 75%, I got thrown out. All this time, I'm putting my own money buying the shares. I'm buying millions and millions and millions of shares with my own money, which in hindsight, I probably was too emotionally involved and I shouldn't have spent, I lost, 25, 40 million or something. But who's counting, right? Supporting the stock. But when everybody else is selling and one guy is buying, you don't have enough firepower to support the stock. But a short answer is you have to get quality, high-powered people that have reputations of supporting people, like The Rock, Prudential, and Fidelity. And if you can get the, sovereign funds, like I was fortunate enough to do. But sovereign funds are very picky now, But your board, and if you're fortunate enough to have already done business with the sovereign funds, I'm not saying they give you carte blanche, but it's a good old boys network. There's still a good old boys network. There's a good old boys network in the German financial world. There's a good old boys network in the English financial world. There's a good old boys network in the U.S. financial world. And even in Ireland. Although from time to time they make some investments that are suspect. But they're still in business. For all the shit that they've been through the last 40, 50 years, they're still in fucking business. I make fun about these guys that I know or gals that I know. But fuck, they still raise money. They still, because at the end of the day, the Irish have a canny ability to make shit happen. They have a canny ability to pull the rabbit out of the hat. You question how they fucking pull the rabbit out of the hat, but they've been doing it for 400 or 500 years. They pull the rabbit out of the hat. So I admire that,
Is there a follow-up question to that?
Sure.
You're getting money from sovereign wealth funds. A good maneuver. Now, I remember you telling me when you were able to get the Israeli government in,
Sure.
and the story goes about speaking to the prime minister that whether you know the difference between a chicken salad and chicken shit, right?
Yep. Those are my words.
Gave you the deal. Now,
This was asked to me by the Minister of Energy. And he said, Mr. Peña, Occidental's here tomorrow. I didn't know Armand Hammer was a Jew at the time. And this guy and this guy were here. And why should we do business with you, a small startup independent? And I said, with the greatest respect, Minister, do you know the difference between chicken shit and chicken salad? And nobody laughed, except then he laughed. And then I said, you've been dealing with the chicken shit, and I am the chicken salad. And so they did business with me.
The question is, getting access to that room, being able to sit down with the decision maker, usually don't work with Catholics or someone.
Correct.
Within their own community.
My representatives were both Jews. Correct.
So, as we recruit sovereign wealth funds from Saudi Arabia, the Israel government, and all the other stuff, how can one get access? Is there a representative?
Through your board. Governor Kerry, though he wasn't a Jew, New York, I was 30% Jews, and he was governor, and he was a financial wizard, and he facilitated that relationship. Plus, our law firm, it represented the Israeli government in New York, were the reasons we got an invitation. But then they fucked us around. I told you we got there, and they kept us in the fucking Hilton for 10 fucking days. And I'm at Mark Spitz, but anyway, that's the only highlight of the fucking 10 days. And they had kept, Mark Spitz was a 7 gold medal winner in 72 Olympics or something, Jewish, and he was at the bar, and he said he had been kept there 12 or 14 days. And I'm a gold medalist Jew. And why are you here? Well, I'm a goyim, which means non-Jew, no gold medals, but I know how to make money, and ostensibly, I didn't use the word ostensibly. I know how to find grease. Grease means oil. And I was called to the headquarters before he was. He was there another 4 or 5 days, them jerking him around. But it's their doofus test. They want to see how bad you want the business. How bad, and they're really, they're knocking their price down instead of due diligence. A lot of people do business with the Israeli government for nothing, just because they want to be part of the, the band that roamed the desert for 40 years with fucking Moses. I didn't fall into that category. And then when they wouldn't meet the last time on the Sabbath, I said, we're leaving. I had a Jewish lawyer and a Texas accountant, and we went. I've told you, we're going to do the deal on the Sabbath, or I'm not staying. And so on the way to the airport, we were arrested at the airport and drugged back at 7 or 8 o'clock at night on the Sabbath. And we signed the deal about 10 through 11 o'clock on the Sabbath. And we went out and had dinner in a Bedouin tent out in the middle of the fucking desert. And we signed the deal. And the Israeli government rabbi came up with a reason why they could sign a deal on the Sabbath. I mean, and so we signed a deal on the Sabbath, and the rest is, of course, then they reneged on the $60 million commitment. But I mean, there's not a lot of Orthodox Jews and many Hasidic Jews, which is beyond Orthodox, don't believe that I got the Israeli government to. But the rabbi, he went in like in a Disney movie, and he went in, the spirits weren't rolling around, but he came out after 20 minutes. We can do it because of this. I knew since I was putting up $60 million that we could come up with a reason. Whether it had anything to do with the Ten Commandments or, but they did. But it's the board and your representatives. Right now, with Russia, I mean, just by serendipity, I know one of the really influential law firms that I've been dealing with for 25 years represents a lot of Russian government entities. But I've been around a million years, and it happens to be two lady partners, which are very senior now. When I started doing business with them 25, 30 years ago, they were juniors. But, now they told the Ruskies and the other, I don't know this for a fact, supposedly, they told the rest of my team and that we like doing business with Dan because Dan's fun. I'm considered a headache, but I always pay my fees. And one of the things I told you in the first seminar, don't argue about fees. No fee is too high to get the deal done. Any fee is too high for the fucking deal creators. This is aside from success fees. Don't argue, and most of the people argue about fees. I never have. We had a drink at the Ritz 2 or 3 weeks ago with one of the senior lady partners who I've known a long, long time. And she said, we trust Mr. Peña. She didn't say she trusted me implicitly, but because I always pay. And being a lawyer went in the room, not everybody always pays. And I paid, I didn't always agree with the fee, but for 50 years I've always paid. There's a lot of other things to argue about, but one of which is in fees when the deal gets done. And again, I've never lost a deal because of lawyers and accountants with success fees. I just haven't. Nabisco, classic example, which we talked about. The fees were, 5 times too much, 3 times too much, but they were categorically too much. But the fucking deal got done. And then 10 years later, they sold it for roughly a 40% discount, which, was a criminal, I don't know. Was there malpractice? I don't know. But it got done. And firms, the big firms, and the Goldman Sachs rarely get accused of malpractice. They come up with some fandango reason why it was required, why it was necessary. And when they're on your side, it's fine. When they're on the other side, you come up with whining reasons. But those big firms get paid for what they do best, and that's getting transactions done.